What's up everybody, welcome back to my solo RPG and wargaming channel. I'm the Lonely Dungeoneer, and today we are playing original Dungeons & Dragons. Now that's not 1st edition, advanced, or even basic Dungeons & Dragons, this is original Dungeons & Dragons, the 1974 box set release of what are now known as the 3 Little Brown Books. Book 1, Men and Magic, Book 2, Monsters and Treasure, and Book 3, The Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. And together, these 3 books represent the oldest commercially available role-playing game, but they actually depend heavily on another book published even earlier, and that is Chainmail, a wargame for medieval miniatures. The majority of Chainmail is devoted to a medieval mass combat system, but it also includes rules for man-to-man combat and a fantasy supplement for handling combats between hero-type individuals and an assortment of fantasy creatures. We can think of original Dungeons & Dragons as an extension to the Chainmail wargaming rule set, focusing on combats between small teams of individuals rather than the larger actions handled by Chainmail, representing the maneuverings of entire armies at a time. Dungeons & Dragons as an independent product became so popular that it spawned a number of magazines, starting with the Strategic Review that eventually became The Dragon, which we will refer to from time to time in this campaign, but it also produced a number of supplements to the base game. This is Book 4, Greyhawk, Book 5, Blackmoor, Book 6, Eldritch Wizardry, and Book 7, Gods, Demigods, and Heroes. Each of these supplements adds content to the original D&D role-playing game, from new player character classes, to new spells and treasures to discover, to altogether new mechanics such as variable weapon damage or rules for handling diseases. In this campaign, we're going to keep things simple by focusing on the original 3 Little Brown Books, but don't worry, we're going to dive deep into each one of these supplements in another series. Book 1 of original D&D also includes what they call the alternative combat system, which, while still heavily dependent on the Chainmail rule set, is slightly less so, and this familiar D20-based system would go on to become the default system for combats in future Dungeons & Dragons editions. In this campaign, we're rather going to use the original rules for combat provided by Chainmail, but in a second OD&D series, not only will we include each of the supplements, but we'll make use of the alternative combat system as well. Now, I'm going to be playing original D&D with Chainmail absolutely solo, and I'll be able to do this by using my favorite solo role-playing system, the Mythic GM Emulator, and its robust ecosystem of tools. This is the solo role-playing system, with everything from the ultra-light one-page version that I've had excellent experiences with, to the 200-plus page core system, to dozens of Mythic magazines that each can add crunch to some unique aspect of solo role-playing. In this campaign, I plan to make use of an assortment of advanced Mythic variations and options, but don't worry, I'll cover each of them as they become relevant to our campaign. With original D&D serving as the role-playing game for this campaign, and Mythic serving as our solo role-playing oracle, the next thing we need is a setting. In keeping with the extremely old-school theme, and given that original D&D was the first commercially available role-playing game, I went out and found the oldest commercially available module for Dungeons & Dragons, and that is the Palace of the Vampire Queen. This module was known as a dungeon kit, and really contains one complete dungeon along with its origin story to help seed the dungeon into your campaign. Set on the island of a Dwarven kingdom, Palace of the Vampire Queen was eventually extended with a second dungeon kit called the Dwarven Glory, also containing a complete dungeon, representing the ruinous undergrounds of an abandoned Dwarven city. This setting was once again greatly extended with the release of Dungeon Kit number 3, the Misty Isles, which, rather than introducing a third dungeon, introduces an entire campaign setting that can serve as a backdrop for the first 2 dungeon kits. The Misty Isles is an archipelago of islands that was once ruled by a powerful dwarven kingdom, since laid mostly to ruins, and is now the home of a number of fantastic factions and magical forces. The Misty Isles will serve as a nearly 50-year-old canvas against which we can paint our own new adventures, and combined with original Dungeons & Dragons and the Mythic Game Master Emulator, should pave the way for as many hours of excitement as we can handle. Alright, now that we've got an introduction out of the way, let's set the stage for the opening scene. I'll use the fate chart from the 2nd edition of Mythic Game Master Emulator as our oracle. The fate chart makes use of a number called the Chaos Factor, which is a value that the oracle will use to control the pacing of our story. I'm going to set the Chaos Factor to the default initial value of 5. And now, my first question for the oracle. Is it a gloomy and rainy day in the city of Artaud? I'm going to say that this is very likely. And given our chaos factor of 5, that makes this question a roll under 75 for a yes. The red die is our tens place, and this gives us a value of 73. And so it is a dull, gloomy, and drizzling day in the dwarven capital city of Arto. And perhaps there's even a cold wind flowing down into the city from the north, from the Baelor Mountains, after which the Isle of Baelor was named. A wind that buffets the traders' carts in the city's bazaars, blows open the shutters in the dwarven peasants' homes in the countryside, and causes a creaking iron sign to sway just outside the fateful tavern where our party will meet for the first time. Let's roll for 2 words on the description's meaning table to get a name for the inn. We get 94, that is swiftly. 88, swiftly simple. So a small crowd has gathered inside the Mindful Mouse, both to beat the cold and the gloom, but also to discuss the latest dreadful news. In the latest and most bold of a series of daring raids, the malevolent vampires under the Queen of the Vampires has gone so far as to break into the royal palace of King Armin, beloved King of the Dwarves, to kidnap his daughter, the princess. A growing sense of dread spreads across the city of Arto as its citizens ponder what this might mean for their safety. And their wise king slowly begins to slip into madness, continuously wandering and pacing the halls of the now empty palace. It's under these uncertain circumstances that our party gathers inside the Mindful Mouse. In his grieving desperation, King Armin has offered fabulous riches, titles, and land holdings to anyone that can return his daughter alive and well. Our party of adventurers, against all odds and in the face of the gloom that has gripped the city of Arto, has collectively decided to pursue this prize and to face the Vampire Queen. But they do have a slight problem in that none of them have ever delved before. And so, in the opening scene of our adventure, the party sits gathered around a table at the Mindful Mouse, making grand plans for the future and daydreaming about how they'll spend their fortune. Are they feeling naively optimistic? Given the situation, I'm going to say that this is probably unlikely, and so this will be a roll under 35. We get a 28. So we know the party is actually quite pleased with themselves and feel confident, ready to take on whatever challenge may come on the difficult journey ahead. But the party is hanging around in a tavern where most of the people are worried and concerned for the future, and the party is clinking their drinks and boasting. Does anybody see this happening and maybe approach the party to say something? I can't quite decide if this would be likely or unlikely, and so I'm going to roll with 50-50, which is the default decision to make if you aren't sure of the odds. That would make this a roll under 50, and we get a 98. That is an exceptional no, which means to me that not only does nobody approach the party, but no one really takes notice of this group of cheerful individuals in one corner of the Mindful Mouse. So our party can presumably plan in peace, but I'm curious, what are their next steps? And rather than taking the traditional approach of making this decision for the party, I'm going to take inspiration from Mythic Magazine 41 to treat Mythic not only as a Game Master emulator, but also as a player emulator. And you'll see how this works as the story unfolds. Given that the party has never actually delved before, I want to know if the party plans on immediately seeking out the Palace of the Vampire Queen. And I'm going to give this odds of nearly impossible because I find it far more likely that the party would attempt an easier expedition first. This is going to be a roll under 15. And we get a 43. It was almost a 3. That was almost a yes, but that is a no. Do any of the party members already know each other? The interesting thing about playing with Mythic as an oracle is that you don't have to plan these kinds of details in advance as preparation for your session. You can rather ask these questions to the oracle as they become relevant, which is really powerful so that you can get right into gameplay. Being in the capital city of the Dwarven Kingdom makes me think that this might be unlikely. However, the party agreeing to trust one another in such a daring endeavor makes me think that this might be likely, and so I think I'm going to split the difference and call this one at 50-50. That is a roll under 50, and we get a 28. Yes. Do they all already know each other? I'm going to call this one unlikely, roll under 35. 27, yes, they all already know each other. Okay, so this kind of makes sense. I was initially imagining that this was going to be a group of strangers that agreed to a common mission for a common cause, but rather the party all already knows of each other, and so presumably they have some baseline of trust already present. Have they all already gone on an adventure together before? I'm going to say that this is unlikely. It's a roll under 35, and we get a 65, so while they do all know each other already, no, they have not actually adventured together as a group before. Do they plan to take on some smaller local job first, or perhaps do they already have a job in mind? Let's ask the former question first. We'll call this likely. Let's roll under 65. We get a 79, no. So the party doesn't want to take on a local job first. And to me, that means that the party is really interested in dungeoneering and in ancient places. The party really wants to delve. Are they already familiar with a dungeon that they could explore? We'll call this likely. That's a roll under 65. We get a 68, no. I find it hard to believe that a party that all knows each other and so are likely from this area wouldn't have at least heard of some local legends about whatever dungeons may exist in the area. So maybe we can rather interpret this to mean that the party isn't sure about where they should take their first steps as a newly formed group of fledgling dungeoneers. Does the party already know someone that's maybe familiar with dungeoneering that can give them some advice on where to begin? We'll call this unlikely, and that is a roll under 35. We get a 44. So no, the party does not already know a dungeoneer that can help guide their first steps or point the way to their first delve. But we did just roll doubles under the chaos factor. That is, we rolled double 4s with a chaos factor of 5. And that means that we just triggered our first mythic random event. So as the party, tucked away in the corner of the loud and crowded Mindful Mouse Inn, are cheerfully making plans for the future, something happens. I'll start by rolling for an event focus, which will give us something specific for our random event to focus on. And I'm opting to use this alternate event focus table provided by a Mythic magazine that's tailored specifically for published adventures. Rolling a D100, we get 48. NPC action. This result is going to take me over into my campaign notes to the game state page, where I'm currently keeping track of the chaos factor, along with 3 lists, our threads, characters, and adventure features. And I should point out that here I'm taking advantage of one of my absolute favorite Mythic variations, the fluid scene structure, which isn't really very different from the default Mythic scene structure, but feels slightly more natural to me and has tended to speed up my gameplay. Let's briefly talk about the 3 lists in our game state. You can think of threads as quests or goals. They're storylines that our characters are motivated to follow. I'll add a thread for our party to find a suitable dungeon for their first expedition. The characters list is for tracking non-player characters that might be important for the current adventure. I'll add King Armin and the Vampire Queen to our characters list. The adventure features list is made specifically for published adventures and allows you to connect Mythic's random event generation system directly to your published setting. I'll add news of a vampire attack to our adventure features list so that from time to time we might hear about new vampire raids. And now, circling back to the random event that we're currently trying to generate, I need to randomly select a character from my characters list to take an action. Scary, I know. Rolling a single d10, we get a 3, which will map to the Vampire Queen. Next, we'll roll for 2 words on the action meeting table to learn what action the Vampire Queen takes. For our first roll, we get 4, agree, and our second word is 18, danger. To me, this means that as the party are sitting in the Mindful Mouse, they suddenly come to the realization that many of the citizens of Arto won't be thrilled about their provoking of the Vampire Queen and might even actively oppose their quest if they make it known. Given this new thought, does the party decide to keep their quest a secret? I'm going to call this very likely. That is a roll under 75. And we get a 53, yes. How very different than I expected this initial scene to go. So the party will actively seek out dungeons to explore, but they'll keep their cards close to the chest and only reveal the true nature of their quest to those they can trust completely. And because we invoked the Vampire Queen in this scene, we unfortunately need to add her to the characters list a second time. And I'm just curious, does the party understand just how dangerous a vampire is and how powerful the vampire queen is? I think this is nearly certain, but I just need to make sure that they understand what they're dealing with. This is a roll under 85, and we get a 37. That is excellent. So now I'm trying to understand the party's next steps. They don't have a dungeoneering type contact that can help guide them on their journey, and they're even trying to keep their quest a secret from most people. So I guess they need to talk about this and decide what to do and where to go from here in this scene. It might be helpful for envisioning this conversation if we understood exactly how many people were members of this party. Are there more than, say, 5 individuals? I'd say that's unlikely. Roll under 35. Oh, 4. That is an exceptional yes. Wow, so that means that there are far more than 5 members of this party. And so I think I'm going to take creative liberty here and say that to me, this means that there are 12 individuals making up this adventuring party. And given that the majority of these party members should be dwarves, this is giving serious Hobbit vibes. And quite fortunately, Chainmail's mass combat rules will greatly simplify the inevitably massive combat encounters that we come across over the course of the campaign. I'm wondering now if the party might already be aware of the existence of the Dwarven Glory dungeon from Dungeon Kit number 2, which seems nearly certain to me as the Dwarven Glory used to be the capital of the Dwarven Kingdom before it fell, and before the Dwarven Glory was laid to ruin in an orc invasion. And I'm sure that this could get confusing, as the name, the Dwarven Glory, is used both to refer to the older Dwarven Empire that spanned the archipelago before it fell, and to refer to the underground capital city of the Dwarves documented in the second Dungeon Kit module. I'm fairly certain that they are aware of the Dwarven Glory, but I'm going to ask the Oracle just to be sure. I'm going to call the odds nearly certain, and this will become a roll under 85. And we get 0-3. That is an exceptional yes. To me, this means that not only is the party aware of its existence, but they're actively discussing it as an option for their first expedition as a group. Now, if we take a look at our map of the Isle of Baelor, we can see in hex number 10, the city of Artois, where the party is meeting at the Mindful Mouse, situated next to the Baelor Mountains. And if we follow this map to the north, we'll see that in hex number 3, there's a swampy region, but this little black dot is actually an undefined underground structure. And that could feasibly be a dungeon to explore, and if so, it's reasonable to think that Artois might have local legends or rumors about a dungeon sitting in a swamp to the north. Also note that I'm using the direction that the numbers are facing on this hex map to determine the cardinal directions, so in this case, the north would be to the left. Is the party also aware of the existence of a dungeon in the swamps to the north? I think this is less likely, so I'm going to call this one a 50-50, which gives us a roll under 50, and we get 26, yes. So if they want to plan an expedition to delve into a real dungeon, they have at least 2 choices, but is the party aware of any other options? This is very possible, but I wouldn't necessarily call it likely, so I think I'm going to go with 50-50, which would give us a roll under 50. And we get an 89 no. So basically, they're making a decision between traveling to the Dwarven Glory in the mountains to the east, or to the dungeon in the swamp to the northwest. Does anyone in our throng of adventurers have a strong opinion one way or the other? There are 12 of them, so I'm going to call this likely. Roll under 65, we get 71. No, they don't have a strong opinion about which way to go. Because I asked this question on behalf of individuals, I'll interpret this to mean that there aren't 1 or 2 strong voices trying to influence the group to go in one direction or the other, and rather, the party is able to productively come to a decision as a group. And we already know that the group is pleased with the decisions that they're making and feeling confident about the future, so I think it would be safe to sum up their decision-making with a single fate question for the Oracle. So I'm going to ask Mythic to make a decision between the 2 dungeons for our party to explore. And a tip for asking fate questions: sometimes you won't know exactly which way to order your question. For example, in our case, we could ask if the party is going to explore the Dwarven Glory, or we could ask if the party is going to explore the swamp. And to align closely with the concept of the chaos factor, I'm going to ask questions like these such that the yes answer produces the more active or energetic result, while the no answer produces a more passive result. So in our case, because I feel that the Dwarven Glory, being a former Dwarven city, and the mountains will feel more familiar to our Dwarven party, and the swamp to the north will feel less familiar and perhaps more mysterious, I'm going to ask the question such that a yes will result in the party heading for the swamp, because that is the more active or energetic outcome. So does the party decide that they're going to head for the dungeon in the swamp to the north? I'm going to call this unlikely with a chaos factor of 5. That is a roll under 35, and we get a 93. That is an exceptional no. I'll interpret this as the party having a healthy respect for the dungeon in the swamp, believing that it is a more dangerous location than the Dwarven Glory. And so, after much deliberation and excitement, and surely with the cheers, the party has come to the decision to ready themselves and assemble for an expedition into the mountains to the ruined caverns of the Dwarven Glory, which is just perfect because we have a book for that. So the party has a plan and they know exactly where they're heading. But how long will it take for this many party members to ready themselves for an expedition? How many days until they're ready to assemble for the journey? I'm sure it'll take some amount of time for each party member to collect or assemble whatever adventuring equipment that they might already have, and then to assess it for anything they might be missing specifically needed for dungeoneering. Then they'll need to buy any missing gear from our tow, get everything packed and ready for the journey, and let any friends or family members know what they're doing and where they're going. So how many days will that actually take? Will they meet, let's say, 3 days from now? We'll call that 50-50. Roll under 50. We get a 34. And then will they assemble at the tavern, at the Mindful Mouse, or maybe at the city gate? Let's ask if they plan to meet at the city gate. We'll call this 50-50. Roll under 50. 83. So they will meet at the Mindful Mouse. So each party member will have 2 full days to collect or purchase any gear that they need, make any necessary arrangements with friends and family members, before assembling on the 3rd day to embark on a journey into the Baylor Mountains and towards the Dwarven Glory. And although most of the people in our tow that day, listening to the many conversations happening in the crowded streets, would have picked up on a sense of grief and despair spreading over the city, 12 brave adventurers, slowly slipping away one by one from the Mindful Mouse, and wandering to their respective homes throughout the city, carry a candle of hope within them. And with this moment, the first scene of our adventure draws to a close. For the next scene, can we maybe have some quick transitions between party members to see what they're getting up to during the 2 days spent preparing for the journey? I don't want to spend the next scene fleshing out 12 unique and original backstories complete with character motivations. But I do think it would be useful to start getting acquainted with some of the members of our party before we embark on this journey together. To determine whether we get this downtime as the next scene, I'm going to ask the scene question, does the party get to prepare for the journey next? And I'll roll a 1d10 and compare it with the chaos factor. We get a 3. We're getting an altered scene next, which is similar to the expected scene, but with some added twist. And given the nature of the scene, jumping back and forth between different party member perspectives, I'm not exactly sure what twist that I would put on the scene. So I'm going to get a little help from a table called the Scene Adjustment Table. We're going to roll a d10 and get an 8, and that tells us to make 2 adjustments. So we're going to roll twice. We get a 3. That is reduce or remove an activity. And a 6, which is add an object. This is an interesting adjustment. So it appears that we're still going to follow along with different party members as they prepare for the journey ahead. But reducing an activity, to me, this means that the majority of our party members were better prepared for adventure than maybe I anticipated. Many simply don't have much to buy, and choose instead to spend their downtime making arrangements for their departure. I'm struggling to find a physical object we can add to so many party members, especially given that we don't really know much about their backstories, other than that they're adventurers. So I'm rather going to interpret this added object to be a sense of enthusiasm and energy. For one reason or another, nearly every party member is excited for the journey ahead. And I say nearly because there's bound to be at least one exception. And let's not forget to reduce the chaos factor by 1 to 4 because we rolled an altered scene. As the second scene opens, and the sun rises on the city of Arto, our party members are each preparing for the journey ahead in their own way. Rolling on the action meanings table, one of our party members are currently 83, start, 24, emotion. Let's also get a sense of where they are. Rolling for a description, we get 11, carefully, 73, carefully petite. There is a small and gated garden with a fountain near the royal palace in Arto commemorating one of the kings that reigned before Armin. And one of our adventurers is currently meditating in the garden. The city's great stone buildings hidden behind willows and irises, with silent tears rolling down their cheeks. Are they sad? I'll call it 50-50. Roll under 35 and we get a 33, which is both a yes and a random event. The event focus is 29, an NPC action. Rolling on our characters list for an NPC we get 10, a choice. I'll choose King Armin this time and roll 2 words to describe the action he takes. We get 24, control, and 61, object. Our character looks up and notices a marble statue depicting one of King Armin's ancestors. Hoisted high above his head and clutched in one of his hands is a watery cord that makes it look like this king is holding on to a waterfall. And running along the full length of the cord are the islands of the Misty Isles archipelago. Is this character contemplating all that the dwarves have collectively lost? I'm going to call this very likely. Roll under 65. 27. Yes, and lost in their thoughts about how important the upcoming journey could be for them all. Is this character a dwarf? Given the context, I'm going to say that this is nearly certain. Roll under 75. 22. Yes. And rolling doubles under the chaos factor once again means we've triggered another random event. Rolling for an event focus, we get 18, NPC action. Because we've invoked King Armin in this scene, I'm going to give him a second entry on our characters list. Rolling for a new NPC to take an action, we get 8, King Armin again. The new action is 88, support, 16, support conflict. Is this character a male? I'm going to give this a true 50-50, and we get 88, no. What is her name? Rolling on the names table we get 52, lie, 47, Lila. So Lila, meditating in the garden and considering this statue, taking in every detail, traces their eyes up the cord, up the waterfall, past the islands of the archipelago, into the king's clutching hand, and noticing his jewel-encrusted crown, before allowing their eyes to follow along the other arm, down beside the king, to where it grips a glittering blade. Thank you so very much for watching the first episode of the Misty Isles campaign, where we're using the Mythic Game Master Emulator to play original Dungeons & Dragons with Chainmail solo. In today's episode, we set the stage for adventure, as our party of 12 dwarves assembled in the Mindful Mouse Tavern in the dwarven capital city of Arto, and collectively decided to take on a secret quest to infiltrate the palace of the Vampire Queen and rescue the Princess of Baylor. And given that none of these adventurers have ever delved before, they've set their sights slightly lower for their first expedition, and decided to travel east together into the Baylor Mountains to the Dwarven Glory, the ruined underground capital of a former Dwarven empire, where they hope to both find treasure that will help finance future expeditions, and to begin learning how to work together for survival in the mysterious caverns beneath the surface of the earth. If you've enjoyed today's session, don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe for more solo RPG content. I'm the Lonely Dungeoneer, and this has been Let's Play Original Dungeons & Dragons with Chainmail Solo. Until we meet again, fight on!